Good morning, class. Settle in, everyone. Today, we are going to explore the fundamental economic theories of zoning and land use. Specifically, we'll examine whether land use should be governed by market mechanisms or state regulation, focusing closely on four critical dimensions: efficiency, property rights, externalities, and political dynamics. Let's begin with our first major theoretical framework, Pigouvian welfare economics, which centers on market failure and externalities. This line of thought traces back to Arthur Cecil Pigou's landmark 1920 work, The Economics of Welfare, and was later synthesized in land use literature by scholars like Chris J. Webster, 1998, L. L. W. Chung, 1994, and P. O'Brien et al., 2024. Pigouvian theory posits that unregulated private land markets naturally fail when individual transactions generate unpriced externalities. Spillover effects such as industrial pollution, excessive noise, or severe traffic congestion that harm third-party neighbors. Because private developers rarely account for these marginal social costs on their own, government intervention becomes necessary to restore economic efficiency. Rather than levying direct pollution taxes on every firm, public authorities use regulatory frameworks to physically separate incompatible land uses, thereby internalizing social costs and protecting public health and welfare. Derived from the landmark 1926 U.S. Supreme Court case, Village of Euclid versus Ambler Realty Company, Euclidean zoning is the primary tool of Pigouvian land regulation. It strictly segregates a municipality into distinct single-use geographic zones. Residential, R, designated for single-family homes and multifamily apartments. Commercial, C, allocated for retail, offices, and restaurants. Industrial, I, reserved for manufacturing, warehousing, and heavy industry. Institutional/public, P, set aside for schools, government buildings, and hospitals. Its primary objective, nuisance prevention, protecting residential areas from the noise, pollution, and traffic of industrial and commercial activities, while providing predictability and protecting property values. However, modern planning theorists heavily critique Euclidean zoning for severe unintended urban consequences. Automobile dependency and sprawl separate where people live, work, and shop, makes walking or cycling impractical, forcing reliance on cars. Also, it fractures cities into single-purpose dormitory communities that sit empty during the workday and dead business districts at night. Contemporary paradigms like new urbanism and smart growth reject rigid Euclidean zoning in favor of form-based codes and walkable, mixed-use development. Let us look at some examples of Euclidean application. A classic example of Euclidean sprawl, where vast areas are zoned exclusively for low-density single-family homes, R1, restricting commercial centers to distant arterial intersections and forcing residents to drive for all daily needs. Planned by Lucio Costa and Oscar Niemeyer, Brasilia represents an extreme modernist application of functional Euclidean zoning, dividing the city into hyper-specialized sectors: hotel sector, banking sector, residential superquadras, making the city heavily automobile dependent. In the Philippines, Quezon City strictly segregates heavy industrial zones. For example, manufacturing plants along Quirino Highway in Novaliches, from low-density residential communities. For example, Loyola Heights, Teachers Village, to protect residents from factory noise and emissions. Also, Ayala Alabang Village, Muntinlupa City, which is a low-density residential enclave, R1, covering over 600 hectares where commercial activities are strictly prohibited within the gates, requiring residents to travel to external peripheral nodes like Alabang Town Center or Melito for retail and services. Furthermore, the municipal CLUP of Santa Rosa Laguna strictly delineates industrial manufacturing, like the Santa Rosa Industrial and Residential Belts, to dedicated parks. For example, Laguna Technopark, while confining housing to separate adjacent developments, for example, Nuvali, maintaining clear land use separation along SLEX. Now let's turn our attention to a contrasting economic paradigm, Cohesion planning theory, which is rooted in Ronald H. Coase's 1960 paper, The Problem of Social Cost, and expanded in Planning Economics by L.L.W. Chung, 1994, and Chris J. Webster, 1998. Cohesion planning theory. Cohesion planning theory challenges top-down government zoning by arguing that when property rights are clearly defined and transaction costs are low, private market bargaining can resolve land use conflicts more efficiently than public planning mandates. Cohesion theorists critique conventional zoning because it may create market distortions, bureaucratic delays, and artificially constrained housing supplies. Rather than relying primarily on municipal zoning boards and regulatory mandates, cohesion theory advocates for private covenants, master-planned private estates, and negotiable development agreements through which land use rights are assigned, purchased, exchanged, and negotiated privately among property owners and developers. In the international setting, Houston, Texas, in the United States, provides a frequently cited example of a major city without a conventional municipal zoning code. Instead of relying primarily on comprehensive municipal zoning, land use in Houston is significantly influenced by private mechanisms such as neighborhood deed restrictions, market-driven development agreements, and private covenants that are enforced by property owners. These private arrangements allow landowners and developers to negotiate certain aspects of land use and development without depending entirely on a centralized municipal zoning system. In the Philippine setting, Bonifacio Global City, BGC, in Taguig City, illustrates how private estate planning and contractual mechanisms can complement formal government regulation. BGC operates under a comprehensive private master plan associated with the Fort Bonifacio Development Corporation, FBDC, together with private deed restrictions and design standards and guidelines, DSG. Developers operate within predetermined development parameters and may acquire specific floor area ratio, FAR, allocations, while agreeing to private covenants governing building heights, setbacks, architectural standards, and land uses. Consequently, some disputes concerning density, development intensity, open spaces, and other land use concerns may be addressed through private contractual arrangements and estate management rules, rather than being resolved solely through conventional municipal zoning variance procedures. Moving to the third framework, public choice theory examines how political self-interest and competing interests among government officials, planners, voters, property owners, and organized groups can shape urban geography and land use regulation. The theory was pioneered by James M. Buchanan and Gordon Tullock and was subsequently applied to land use regulation by scholars such as J. M. Pogodzinski and T. R. Sass, Chris J. Webster, and J. J. McCarthy and D. P. Smith. Public choice theory applies microeconomic models of self-interest to the behavior of government officials, planners, voters, and political coalitions. It challenges the assumption that local planning agencies always function as neutral institutions, acting solely in pursuit of the public interest. Instead, it views zoning and land use regulation as political arenas in which different groups compete to influence government decisions. Within this framework, zoning may become vulnerable to rent-seeking behavior, in which organized groups, particularly affluent homeowners and so-called NIMBYs, or individuals who oppose developments in their own neighborhoods, use political influence to support restrictive zoning policies that protect or enhance their private interests. One of the most important applications of public choice theory to urban geography is the concept of exclusionary zoning. Exclusionary zoning refers to regulatory provisions that intentionally or unintentionally increase the cost of housing, restrict population density, or prevent particular types of residents from accessing certain communities. Such regulations may include excessively large minimum lot sizes, minimum building floor areas, restrictions or prohibitions on multifamily and socialized housing, low floor area ratios, and strict building height limitations. Although these regulations may sometimes be justified in terms of maintaining neighborhood character, protecting property values, or managing infrastructure capacity, they can also function as economic and social barriers to entry. The socio-spatial consequences of exclusionary zoning can be substantial because high regulatory barriers can contribute to spatial and economic segregation, protect the accumulated wealth and tax base of affluent communities, and intensify urban housing shortages. Such regulations can also create a severe spatial mismatch between residential locations and employment opportunities. Low-income workers and essential service workers may be unable to afford housing near major employment centers and are consequently forced to live farther from their workplaces. This geographical separation increases commuting times and transportation costs while transferring a portion of the social and economic costs of exclusionary land use policies to workers and households. An international example can be found in Atherton, Silicon Valley, California, which is widely recognized as one of the wealthiest municipalities in the United States. Atherton has historically maintained restrictive residential land use policies, including large minimum lot requirements and limitations on higher density residential development. Such regulations have contributed to the preservation of a predominantly low-density residential environment and have made housing extremely expensive, thereby limiting the ability of many middle and lower-income workers, including teachers and service employees, to reside near major employment centers in Silicon Valley. Another example is Scarsdale in Westchester County, New York, an affluent suburban community known for expansive residential lots and restrictive regulations governing multifamily development. These policies have helped preserve low-density residential patterns and high property values while limiting access to housing within a community associated with highly regarded public services and schools. From a public choice perspective, such outcomes illustrate how politically organized residents may support regulations that protect the economic and social advantages associated with their neighborhoods. In the Philippine setting, exclusive gated subdivisions in Makati City, particularly Forbes Park and Dasmariñas Village, provide relevant examples of how private residential interests can influence urban land use patterns. Homeowners associations within these high-value residential enclaves may advocate for maintaining low-density residential environments, strict building height limitations, and large minimum lot requirements in areas located immediately adjacent to one of Metro Manila's most intensive financial districts. From a public choice perspective, resistance to high-density redevelopment or affordable housing can protect residents' privacy, preserve neighborhood character, and sustain high property values. But it can also contribute to the spatial separation of high-income residents from the workers who serve the surrounding central business district. Consequently, employees such as janitors, security personnel, clerks, and other service workers may have to commute long distances from communities in Cavite, Laguna, Bulacan, and other parts of the metropolitan region. Similar dynamics can be observed in communities such as Corinthian Gardens and Valle Verde in Quezon City and Pasig City. Located along or near the Ortigas Center Growth Corridor, these communities have historically maintained low-density residential environments that limit the conversion of individual residential lots into medium or high-density developments. From the perspective of public choice theory, maintaining these restrictions can protect the interests and property values of existing residents while simultaneously limiting the availability of housing in strategically located urban areas. The resulting spatial pattern demonstrates how political and private interests can influence not only who can access particular neighborhoods, but also how land is distributed across the metropolitan landscape. Finally, the fourth major framework is bid-rent theory, which explains urban spatial structure through the principles of urban land economics. The theory was formulated by William Alonzo in his influential 1964 work, Location and Land Use, and has subsequently been discussed and developed within the broader literature on location, accessibility, and spatial structure. Rooted in neoclassical urban land economics, Alonzo's bid-rent theory explains how land prices and land use patterns are shaped by competition among different users for locations with varying levels of accessibility to the Central Business District, or CBD. Because centrally located areas generally provide better access to employment, markets, services, transportation networks, and economic opportunities, they can reduce transportation and transaction costs. As a result, land located near the CBD tends to command higher rents, which is described as its higher bid rent. Different land users are willing to pay different amounts for accessibility depending on the economic returns they can generate from a particular location. Commercial enterprises, such as corporate headquarters, financial institutions, major retail establishments, and other high-value businesses, can often generate substantial revenue from relatively small areas of land. They can therefore afford to bid more aggressively for centrally located properties than many residential or industrial users. As distance from the CBD increases, accessibility generally declines, and land values tend to decrease. This produces a spatial gradient in which high-value and high-density commercial activities are concentrated in highly accessible locations, followed by different forms of residential development, and farther toward the urban periphery, larger footprint industrial, agricultural, or other land uses. Although contemporary cities frequently exhibit polycentric rather than purely concentric development patterns, the fundamental principle of competition for accessibility remains relevant. An international example can be observed in the Tokyo metropolitan area of Japan. Land values are particularly high around major transportation nodes and financial centers, such as Marunouchi and Shinjuku, where high-rise commercial towers and other intensive developments dominate the urban landscape. As one moves outward along major railway corridors toward suburban areas in prefectures such as Saitama and Chiba, land values generally decline and the dominant land uses gradually shift toward multifamily residential buildings, single-family housing, and peripheral industrial facilities. This spatial pattern illustrates how accessibility, transportation infrastructure, and competition for strategically located land influence urban development. In the Philippine setting, the spatial structure of Metro Manila provides a particularly useful illustration of bid-rent theory. Prime financial and commercial corridors, such as Ayala Avenue in Makati and the major commercial areas of Bonifacio Global City, command extremely high land values because of their accessibility, economic concentration, and proximity to major employment and business activities. Consequently, these locations are generally occupied by high-density corporate towers, financial institutions, luxury residential developments, major commercial establishments, and other activities capable of generating sufficiently high returns to justify the cost of centrally located land. As one moves outward from the major business districts along transportation corridors, such as the South Luzon Expressway, Cavite-Laguna Expressway, and emerging rail connections, land prices generally become more affordable. This creates opportunities for horizontal residential developments, suburban subdivisions, industrial estates, warehouses, and other land uses requiring larger areas. Developments in the suburban areas of Cavite, Laguna, and Bulacan therefore become economically viable because the lower cost of land allows developers to provide larger residential or industrial footprints that would be prohibitively expensive in the central business districts. The resulting spatial pattern demonstrates how land users compete for locations according to their ability to pay and the economic value they derive from accessibility. To conclude, these four economic frameworks provide complementary lenses through which urban growth, land use regulation, and spatial organization can be understood. Pigouvian theory emphasizes the role of government intervention in correcting negative externalities and addressing market failures, while Cogent planning theory highlights the potential of clearly defined property rights and private bargaining to resolve land use conflicts. Public choice theory shifts attention toward the political processes through which self-interested actors, organized groups, and local governments influence zoning and urban development, while bid-rent theory explains how competition for accessibility and differences in economic returns shape land prices and the spatial distribution of urban activities. Taken together, these frameworks demonstrate that the contemporary city is not simply the product of physical expansion or government planning, but is the outcome of continuous interactions among markets, institutions, political interests, property rights, accessibility, and competing claims over urban land.